Good morning and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here in Brampton. I want to start by acknowledging that we're gathered on treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and the Wyandot Nations, on lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. My name is Andria Barrett, and I'm the NDP candidate in Brampton South, and I'm delighted to be joined here today with some of my colleagues. Navjeet Kaur from Brampton West, Sarah Singh from Brampton Centre, Sandeep Singh from Brampton North, Grathan Singh from Brampton East, Nicholas Rabba from Mississauga Streetsville, Wasim Ahmed from Mississauga Malton, and Kovar Hussain from Mississauga East Cooksville. There's a lot at stake during this election, and there's a lot at stake in our community, specifically in Brampton. We cannot go back to the Liberals and the PCs. Let's talk about the Liberals. They broke it. They've cut, they froze hospital budgets instead of investing in growing communities like we have here in Brampton. They've made Brampton ground zero for hallway medicine. They closed over 270 schools, and there's $15 billion in repair backlog. Del Duca will not take responsibility. We've seen that there's been fraud during this election, and we know, based on the Liberals' 15-year track record. The Conservatives have made it even worse. 4 years of big cuts, bad choices, and he favors his rich buddies. He refuses to bring Brampton the 3 full hospitals that we deserve. Education cuts before, during, and after the pandemic. He kept wages low. He refuses to act on soaring costs like auto insurance and homes. People coming together behind Andrea Horwath. When we go door to door, all we hear is amazing support for Andrea Horwath and the NDP party. She listens, she cares, and everyone knows she will work very hard for you. Now, I'd like to introduce everyone to the next Premier of Ontario, Andrea Horwath.
Thanks so much, Andria Barrett, for that kind introduction. We're here in Brampton once again to talk about the healthcare needs of Brampton. And what I want to tell the people of Brampton is that we can stop the cuts. We can stop the cuts to healthcare and make sure we're hiring the nurses that we need in this community to take care of people. We right now in Brampton are short 90 nurses. 90 nurses short in a hospital system, a healthcare system that is completely inadequate already for the people of Brampton. So I want people of Brampton to know that the shortage that we have now will be fixed by the NDP. We'll hire those 90 nurses, and then we'll hire another 1,200 nurses just to get some quality of care back to the people of Brampton, or actually to get it for the first time to the people in Brampton. We're here with a number of nurses as well because they know how important it is to ensure that we're bringing more nurses into Ontario instead of chasing them away, which is what Doug Ford has been doing. We have to stop the cuts to healthcare, and we have to hire more nurses, and we have a plan to do exactly that. We have a plan to stop Doug Ford's low-wage policy. We have a plan to hire 30,000 nurses around across the province, 1,200 right here in Brampton. And we have a plan to make sure that every single community has access to the health care they need. And as Andrea said, we watched as the Liberals froze hospital budgets. They gave us hallway medicine. They fired 1,600 nurses. We cannot trust the party that broke our healthcare system to now fix it. And of course, Doug Ford's cuts are just going to hurt more. Conservatives always cut, and we are going to see more cuts from the Conservatives if we give them the chance. And that's why I'm saying to people, we can do better than that. We can fix our healthcare system with an NDP government. This time, everybody needs to come together. Tomorrow's election day. Everybody needs to come together and get behind the NDP so that we can fix our healthcare system. Can you imagine how much better it will be in Brampton? Not only when we hire all the nurses necessary to provide the quality of care people need. I've talked to people in Brampton for many, many years now, and they avoid the hospital here. They avoid the hospital. If there's an emergency, literally people tell me they'll drive to Mississauga, they'll drive to Toronto, they'll even drive to Georgetown to get to an emergency ward because they know how packed Brampton Civic is. And it's not Brampton Civic's fault. It's because there aren't enough hospitals in Brampton, and people know that we've made the commitment not only to make Peel Memorial a full hospital, but to build a third hospital and make sure there's a cancer center here as well. That's what the people of Brampton deserve now, but they've deserved that for over a decade. For over 20 years, they've deserved that. But they didn't see it from the Liberals. And of course, things will get worse with Doug Ford's cuts. And so, let's come together. Let's come together and hire the nurses that we need to care for people so that folks don't have to drive long distances to get to an emergency ward, so that people who go to the emergency ward know that they're going to have the quality of care, that they're going to have the attention that they deserve and that nurses want to provide. Let's get together and make sure that happens. We can fix healthcare. We can hire nurses. We can make sure Brampton gets its fair share of nurses and of healthcare investments, hospital beds, emergency wards. But to do that, to make sure that that happens, I'm asking people to come together behind the NDP. I am asking people tomorrow, when you get to the ballot box, a vote for the NDP is a vote to stop the cuts. A vote for the NDP is a vote to hire nurses. A vote for the NDP is a vote to fix all of the things that we know have been broken, all of the things that we all know matter so much. We can fix those things. We can make life more affordable. We can tackle the auto insurance industry. We can make sure that we are making housing more affordable, giving people an opportunity to build a better life here, giving folks a chance to get the mental health care that they need, the dental care that they need, the prescription drugs that they need with their OHIP cards, not their credit cards. We can fix the things that matter most to people. Tomorrow, let's come together and make that happen. I'm really happy to be here with these fantastic candidates from both the Brampton area as well as some of the Mississauga ridings for Peel region. New Democrats are with you, and this time you can have a premier that works for you each and every day. Let's make that happen together tomorrow. I'll take. Thank you. And because I did say this is a media availability, I'm now available for questions from the media.
So we'll move to on-site questions first. We'll just ask folks to line up at the microphone. If you have a question, it'll be one question, one follow-up. First question comes from Charlie Pinkerton from Queen's Park Briefing.
Morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Andrea, and everyone else, the long list of candidates. Hello. Being it is the last day of the campaign, I just want to get something very crystal clear from you. You've said from the beginning of the campaign that job number one is defeating Doug Ford. Would you like to encourage voters to vote strategically? So, for example, in ridings where the NDP candidate has the best chance of beating a PC candidate, they should vote NDP. And in ridings where the Liberal candidate has the best chance of beating the PC candidate, to vote Liberal. So would you like to recommend that or not?
Actually, what I would like to recommend is that the people of Ontario vote for their NDP candidate, because we're the only ones that you can trust to fix the things that are broken. You can't trust the Liberals to fix what they broke. We know that Doug Ford's cuts are going to hurt even more. It's the NDP that is your chance this time. This time, I'm asking people to come behind the NDP to vote for our candidates. And when we talk about who has the best chance of winning in ridings around the province, the NDP came first or second in 100 communities, in 100 ridings in the last election campaign. So really what we want to do is make sure that those places where the NDP came second, we're asking people to make sure we come first in those ridings tomorrow. Make sure the NDP comes first in those other 60 ridings that we came in second last time, and that will guarantee that Doug Ford will not see a second term as Premier in this province. And that's what people tell me they want. 6 out of 10 Ontarians tell me they do not want to see Doug Ford with another chance at the Premier's chair. Why? Because everybody knows his cuts are going to hurt. People need the support of their government. They don't need a government or a Premier that's focused on his buddies, that's going to give them everything that they want, while the rest of us all pay the price. So tomorrow, I just want to be very clear. I'm asking people to vote NDP. And that way we will defeat Doug Ford for sure, and we'll start to fix the things that matter most to all of us.
Okay, and then on another note, besides things that have happened during this campaign outside of your control, such as, you're contracting COVID and the plane difficulties, again, that was not your party's fault, is there anything you wish you would have done differently over this past month?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the plane difficulties, because if there's one serious regret I have, is that we couldn't make it to Northern Ontario. I've spent a lot of time over the years in Northern Ontario. Northerners know that I know them, that I respect them, that I get what they deal with day in and day out, and I just really regret that I wasn't able to get there. But I have to say, we've spent, all of us, every single day on this campaign, listening to what people have to say and providing hope for the future. And I just can't tell you how many people are so terrified of tomorrow that Doug Ford will get another chance at governing. I mean, literally, people approach me and end up in tears after talking about how fearful they are about the next round of cuts that are coming. I talk to people with disabilities who are telling me that they have no hope if Doug Ford's re-elected, that they are literally. I met a woman in Peterborough. In fact, she gave me a little thank you card and said to me, "Thank you. I know that if you get elected, I won't be homeless. But if Doug Ford gets elected, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to stay in my unit, in my apartment." This is what people are saying. I met a woman yesterday in Whitby. She happened to be driving by, picking her son up from a birthday party. And so she had her son in the car. They saw our bus. She started talking about the NDP, and they decided to get out of the car and come and join us with our Whitby and Oshawa area candidates. She told me that she is going to vote NDP because she believes that we're the only party that is going to fix what's been broken. She said she knows that the Liberals aren't going to do it, that they haven't done it, that they had a chance, and they chose not to fix the things that are broken. In fact, they broke many of those things. And she's terrified, and I'm not using that word lightly, terrified of what 4 more years of a Conservative government will do. And in the process of having that conversation with her, she was in tears. Now, that is not the first person that I've spoken to over the course of this campaign who is that fearful, that worried, that troubled about what more Conservative cuts will bring to our province. We need to support Ontarians. Everyday people should be able to afford everyday life here. Everyday Ontarians should have hope for the future, but they don't. And the specter of another Doug Ford government, more Conservative cuts, is really terrifying for people. So that's why I say to folks, I don't regret anything that we've done on this campaign. Why? Because we've listened to you. We've listened to you. We've put a plan together for you that will start fixing the things that are broken, that will bring more nurses into the front lines of our healthcare system and PSWs, that will build more hospitals in Brampton, that will fix our kids' crumbling schools, that will make sure you can get healthcare for your entire body, right? And your mind. Mental health care, dental care, prescription drugs with your OHIP card, not with a credit card. Where you can make sure that you can afford your car insurance. Where we outlaw the gouging at the pumps and go after the big gas and oil companies to make sure that they're treating us fairly. These are the kinds of things we can do. Make housing affordable. Make rental housing affordable. make sure that young people know that they can have that dream of home ownership again in Ontario. Most young people, most people who have not had a chance to get into the housing market have given up. Doug Ford's big, massive highways to mansions that nobody can afford is the wrong direction for everyday Ontarians. So tomorrow is an important a day, and I just want people to realize and to know and to understand that we're in it for you. We have always been in it for you, but we are definitely the party that will fix the things that matter most to all of us. And tomorrow, I'm asking for you to take that on, to put your ex beside your NDP candidate, and together we can fix what's broken.
Next question comes from Émilie Pelletier from Le Droit.
Hi, bonjour.
Bonjour.
I want to ask you about something a little bit different.
Sure.
Drug decriminalization in BC. The NDP has been asking for, has been begging the government to declare a state of emergency in the northern part of Ontario. Is drug decriminalization something that the NDP would do if you become premier?
First of all, I want to congratulate John Horgan, the BC NDP Premier, for doing what he has done, urging the federal government to provide an exemption for criminal charges for simple possession of hard drugs in British Columbia. It's about saving lives. It is about saving lives, and that's what we have to do. And when we look at what's happened in Northern Ontario, the tragedies that have occurred, not just in Northern Ontario, of course, in our entire province, every town, every city, every community has been impacted by the opioid crisis and by the overdose crisis. We know we have a poison drug supply, and we know we have a government that has completely done the wrong thing when it comes to providing supports that people need to address their drug dependencies. You should not ever cap services for people for safe consumption sites or safe injection sites. I mean, that is a cruel and heartless way to address a crisis of health. It's a health crisis. Addiction is a health issue, and to cap those treatment sites, those consumption and treatment sites, was shameful. We can't do that. We do need to listen to what chiefs of police are saying around the province, around the country, what advocates are saying and have been saying for a long time. We need a safe drug supply. We need to decriminalize simple possession of drugs and provide people with the supports that they need to manage their addictions and to save their lives. You know, when just going back for a moment to the north, I didn't get to the north, and I regret it, as I had said. But when I hear from Jamie West, for example, the MPP for Sudbury, that the number of there's a memorial of crosses that have been put on display on the side of a roadway to represent all of the people who have lost their lives to the opioid crisis, the drug overdose crisis that we have. It started with 50-odd crosses a couple of years back, about a year and a half ago, and now it's well over 250 crosses symbolizing the people that have lost their lives to the opioid and drug crisis. That shouldn't be happening. We need to do better. The tragedy, the pain, the trauma that family members deal with as they lose a loved one to a drug overdose, it's just terrible. Entire communities are traumatized. We have to do better, and we can do better. So yes, absolutely, making sure that we have a safe drug supply, that we decriminalize simple possession, but most importantly, that we provide the services that people need to try to help them get well.
But we're talking about Northern Ontario here. BC had a huge momentum, the whole province. So how do you think Ontario would be ready for something like this without this, 6 years state of emergency momentum like in BC?
But it's not just Northern Ontario. We're in Brampton right now. It's happening in Brampton. It's happening in downtown Toronto. It's happening in Hamilton, in my community. It's happening in Peterborough. It's happening in small towns and communities around the province. Yes, it's happening in Thunder Bay, and yes, it's happening in Sudbury. But I've talked to mayors from all kinds of different communities, big and small. I've talked to, the mayor of North Bay. I've talked to the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie. I've talked to smaller community leaders who have all identified a similar problem. Ontario is a huge province. There's no doubt it's a huge province, but no corner of this province is unaffected by the opioid crisis and the deaths that are occurring in communities. We have an obligation to save lives and to provide services that people need to try to overcome or manage their addictions.
Next question comes from Nusheen Ziafatsi from the Canadian Press.
Hi, Andrea. My questions are also about decriminalization. Do you think the limit of 2.5 grams is appropriate, or would you ask for 4.5 grams as BC did?
I think that that's a conversation that we need to have here in Ontario with our public health leadership, with our political leadership, frankly. This needs to be a decision that's informed by experts, frankly, and I am not an expert when it comes to the dosages of any given substance. I'm not in a position to make that judgment call, but what I am in a position to say is if we have the opportunity, we will be having those conversations and we'll be talking to the federal government.
Do you think it would be faster for the federal government to just apply this exemption across the country as opposed to just one province by province by province?
Well, I don't know specifically where every province is in terms of their own situations when it comes to the opioid crisis and the addiction situation and the deaths. I know where Ontario is, and that would be my obligation and my responsibility to address a crisis, a health crisis happening in this province. And I would leave it up to the leaders of other provinces to have those conversations with the federal government. And then the federal government needs to make their decision, based on what premiers are bringing to their attention and asking for.
And I know you spoke about unsafe drug supply. Can you speak a bit about what the NDP would do to address that issue, really?
Well, I've heard about it quite a bit, mostly from public health leadership in many communities around the province, and from chiefs of police as well. The drug supply is poisoned. We know that people are overdosing because their drug of choice is being laced with things that they didn't expect to be in those doses of drugs that they're taking. So things like fentanyl, things like carfentanil. These things are showing up and killing people because they're killing people because they're showing up in their drugs and they weren't expecting those kinds of poisons to be in their drugs. And so that when I say we have to make sure that there's a safe drug supply, I'm reflecting what public health officials and what healthcare leaders are telling us is a big part of the problem, a poison drug supply.
Next question comes from Hardeep Kaur from Parvasi.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, I'm also good. So you have talked about the overdoses, the drugs also. I have a question regarding the dental care, Andrew. As you are the leader of the NDP who has spoke about the dental care, that you are going to add this in the health card, like healthcare card we have in the Ontario, right? Other parties, the Progressive Conservative as well as the Liberals, they have not done any, they have not bring this issue, because dental issue is the biggest issue in Ontario, most expensive, people can't afford it. But your party has bring this issue, and you said that you're going to add in the health card. So can you just explain that, how your party is going to do that?
Yeah, absolutely, and you're absolutely right. We're the only ones that are talking about dental care, and people need dental care. Your mouth is part of your body, and it's something that if you don't get the dental care you need, it can create serious other health concerns for people. I can't tell you how many folks have approached me during this campaign to tell me their dental care story, and whether it is a person who I met in one community whose wife whose partner is a dentist, and he said that she is constantly providing free services for people because she knows that they need the dental work done, but they can't afford it. But he said she can't keep doing that forever. She has a business to run, and she feels badly for people who can't afford it. I was talking to another woman just outside of Ottawa recently, and she said she had an impacted tooth that she couldn't afford to see a dentist and deal with it until it started to actually infect her jaw. And she finally talked to a dentist and tried to put a plan together, a payment plan that would have taken her almost 3 years to pay off the bill for that dental work. When she finally went to the dentist's office after having made that arrangement, the dentist just felt so bad about this woman's inability to afford her dental care that he said, you don't have to, forget it, you don't have to pay. You don't have to worry about the payment plan. I met another woman who told me for 3 years she had an abscessed tooth for 3 years, dealing with the pain, taking Tylenol and other painkillers to try to deal with the pain until it got so bad that she could justify to herself even that it was time to go to an emergency ward to get that tooth pulled. Nobody should be going to an emergency ward for dental services, but it happens every single day. Every single day, there are people in emergency wards across our province for dental care needs. So yes, we're going to start with people earning $90,000 or less. That's the first group of people that will be getting dental care in our plan. And then after that group of people has been kind of onboarded, if you will, then we will be increasing it to everyone who's making under $200,000 a year. By the end of the second year, it will be everybody up to $200,000 a year. But I can say this, if for some reason somebody who's making over $200,000 a year can't access dental care, we're not going to let them fall through the cracks. People deserve to have dental care. Not only because of the things that I talk about, and it's going to relieve pressure on our hospitals as well, but I've met a lot of people, young people, who've pulled out their own teeth. How do you maintain your self-confidence? How do you maintain your pride in yourself? How do you go to a job interview if you have gaping holes in the front of your mouth because you had to pull out your own teeth? We can do much, much better for people, and I'm so excited that tomorrow people can go to the ballot box, mark their X beside their NDP candidate, and get the dental care that they need with their OHIP card, not a credit card.
I have another question.
Sure.
This is not related to the elections, but yes, it is similar to elections also. So tomorrow, Ontarians will be getting their next premier, right? I know that all the leaders are excited for this one, and NDP is also. So as a leader of NDP, what you have ensured, like what's the difference between the last election you ran and this election? What difference you have already enacted?
I think that it's clear that the stakes are very high in this election. We've had 4 years of a Conservative government, and life has gotten harder. We've seen the Ford government, the Conservative government cut. They were cutting in long-term care before the pandemic. Long-term care was already on its knees. The Liberals were cutting in long-term care. Then Doug Ford got elected. He started cutting in long-term care. He promised an iron ring around long-term care during COVID. We saw that never happened. We will not see the kinds of investments in long-term care that we need, or in home care so people can stay home with supports longer. We won't see that with the Conservative government. What we need is to vote NDP, because the NDP will get the profits out of home care and out of long-term care, and we'll put the care back in. We'll make sure that our seniors have a decent quality of life. We saw a premier who, when he got elected 4 years ago, took $6,000 out of the pockets of the lowest wage workers. He canceled the minimum wage. Now he's trying to pretend that he's on the side of working people. Well, if you don't provide paid sick days during a pandemic, and so people have to go to work sick and expose their coworkers or come home having been exposed and bring COVID into your house and infect your family. We know that happened. That happened right here in Brampton. That happened through the pandemic. A premier that cares about working people would have provided paid sick days. So we are going to do that. We're going to do that. Tomorrow, you can vote for a candidate and a premier that's going to bring paid sick days to every Ontarian, that's going to increase the minimum wage to $20 an hour, that's going to make sure that your dental care, your mental health care, your prescription drugs are paid for with your OHIP card, not your credit card. Make housing more affordable. Make sure people can feel confident that their rent is not going to continue to go up until the point where they can no longer afford it. These things are possible. These are things we can fix. They were broken by the Liberals. Conservatives in 4 years have made it even worse. And I think that's the big difference between the last election and this election. People know we can't afford more conservative cuts. We have to stop the cuts. That's what this election's about. Stop the cuts, hire more nurses, fix our healthcare system, and fix the things that we all care most about. Make life more affordable for Ontarians. Everyday people in this province should be able to afford everyday life here. And with an NDP government, that's exactly what you'll get.
We'll move to questions on Zoom now. First question comes from Richard Southern from City News.
Hey, Richard.
Hey, Andrea. Good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. There were a number of scandals, primarily early on in Mr. Ford's mandate, that we really haven't heard much about in the campaign. Can you tell us why you chose not to bring up issues like the cutting of Toronto City Council, the use of the notwithstanding clause, and the attempted appointment of Ron Taverner to the OPP, Andrea?
Well, Richard, I think that those things are obviously pieces of the Ford government's legacy that folks remember and know that they were wrong. It was wrong to have a ham-fisted approach, not only when it came to Toronto City Council, but a number of city councils were, for example, hoping to bring in a ranked ballot for this coming municipal election. I think of the City of London particularly. And Doug Ford said no to that. He decided that he was going to rule this province with a ham-fisted approach, and he stomped on local democracies. That is absolutely not the right way to go for this province. And you're right, there were other scandals like the Ron Taverner situation. But the biggest scandal that we have right now is that this premier and this party are prepared to continue to cut and hurt people even more. Conservative cuts always hurt. People are watching as the things that they care about the most, like their healthcare system, are falling apart. And they know that Doug Ford's only going to make it worse. The Conservative cuts are only going to make it worse. They're terrified of the privatization, further privatization of our healthcare system. But they know that's exactly what Conservatives like to do. They like to privatize healthcare. And so we're having conversations during this election campaign about the things that people tell us that they care about. And you know, it's not just about what we've seen in terms of the track record of Doug Ford as the premier of this province. But everybody knows things have gotten harder. Life has gotten harder. The promises that Doug Ford made to make life easier didn't come to pass. And people know it and they feel it. And so our election campaign has been about giving people hope. Giving people hope that they don't have to keep going back and forth between Liberals and Conservatives, and watch as their health care continues to fall apart. Watch as their life continues to get more expensive. Watch as the big insurance companies are able to gouge people and continue to keep in place things like postal code discrimination, which the people of Brampton face every single day in our province. These things can be fixed. And so we want to make sure that people know that there is hope, that the things that matter most to us can be fixed, and that you can have a great life in this province once again. But you can't have it with Liberals that broke most of the things that need fixing. How can you trust them? How can you trust them when they broke them? And of course, we've seen with 4 years of Doug Ford, things are just going to get harder if we let Doug Ford yet again start cutting more in our province. So we're trying to be hopeful.
Thank you. Are you making a direct appeal today to potential Liberal or Green voters?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm asking people to come together behind the NDP this time. We are strong, we are ready, and we're working for you. But we also know that 6 out of 10 people don't want Doug Ford to get elected. They don't want Doug Ford back in the Premier's chair. A lot of the things I've talked about are things that we all care about, that people who have in the past voted Liberal care about, that New Democrats care about, that people in the past that have voted Green care about. We all care about these things. This time, the way to make sure Doug Ford is not in the Premier's chair after tomorrow night is that we all come together behind the NDP and vote for the things that matter to you. Vote for the things you care about. Vote for your NDP candidate, defeat Doug Ford, and let's make sure we start fixing the things that are broken.
Next question comes from Colin DeMello from Global News.
Good morning, Ms. Horwath. So just kind of on that point that Richard was making here, do you feel, or are you telling voters that a vote for the Ontario Liberals is a vote for Doug Ford?
What I'm saying to people is you don't have to keep going back to the Liberals. 15 years, they chose not to fix the things that were broken. They chose not to build hospitals in Brampton. They chose to lay off nurses. They chose to squeeze hospital budgets. You know, it's interesting. There's some question as to whether the Liberals brought us hallway medicine. I was there. They brought us hallway medicine. They froze hospital budgets. They fired nurses. Brampton is ground zero. It's really ground zero. There's 2 communities that I say are ground zero, particularly for Liberal cuts that brought us hallway medicine. Brampton and London, Ontario. Those 2 communities have, this one and London have been the ones that are the most obvious when it comes to hallway medicine. But I'm from Hamilton. We had hallway, we still have hallway medicine. We still have hallway medicine in Brampton. As the pandemic ends, it's getting worse, not better. We have backlog surgeries, backlog procedures. Conservative cuts aren't going to fix those things. The Liberals brought us our hospital crisis in the first place. So yes, I'm saying to people, this time, vote NDP. Vote NDP, defeat Doug Ford, and start fixing the things that matter most to all of us, whether you're a previous Liberal voter or a previous Green voter. This time, let's come together. Let's come together, defeat Doug Ford, and actually get people the things that they need and want. Make life more affordable. Make sure people get the health care they need. There is hope. There is absolutely hope. And tomorrow, you're going to help us turn that hope into reality.
All right, thank you. There also, during this election campaign, there seems to be a fair amount of voter apathy. I'm wondering how concerned you are. Have you noticed that voter apathy, and how concerned are you about low voter turnout tomorrow?
I'm always concerned about voter apathy, Colin, because I think that people have just become cynical about the fact that it never changes. They vote Liberal, nothing changes. They vote Conservative, nothing changes. Liberals, Conservatives, Liberals, life just gets harder, and the things that we need to build a good life become less and less achievable. Whether that's healthcare, sitting in emergency rooms, emergency wards for hours and hours and hours on end to be admitted into a gurney in a hallway. We've seen what happens when governments cut and when people who get elected are more concerned about their political insiders or more concerned about their big fish buddies, which is what we had with Mr. Ford. It's time for a government that works for you each and every day. It's time for a government that pays attention to the people of this province and helps them to build a better life. That's why I'm in politics. That's always been what's motivated me. And this time, you can have a premier that works for you each and every day.
Next question comes from Joanne Chianello from CBC.
Hi, Joanne.
Good morning, Andrea. Thanks for taking our questions. I want to go back to legalizing small amounts of drugs, decriminalizing them. And I'm sorry if you've already said this, but I want to ask very specifically, would an NDP government ask the federal government for the same exemption that BC just received?
I would be absolutely open to that, and I would be talking to and getting advice from leading public health experts, but I've already had a lot of these conversations in a number of different communities with public health experts, with committees of people who are trying to solve the crisis of death and overdose in their communities. And oftentimes these communities these committees are led by public health officials. They have policing officials there. They have social workers there, and they're trying to solve a really tragic crisis that's unfolding in virtually every community. So yes, I absolutely will have those conversations. I will take their advice when it comes to how to ensure that we do this properly. But it is about saving lives.
Okay, thanks very much. And I just want to pivot a little bit to actually what we're doing now, media availability. Mr. Ford has not made himself available since the rooftop in Ottawa on Monday. And this morning, Mr. Del Duca also cancels his media availability. I think he's going to maybe take questions this afternoon. What do you think of that?
I don't know how somebody can want to show people that they can be a good leader of this province by hiding out, by not having these kinds of conversations. People deserve to know who it is that's looking for the job of Premier, that's asking for your trust, that's asking for your support. Mr. Ford has been in hiding. His candidates have been in hiding. They haven't been attending debates, for example. You know, if you're going to do the job, you got to show up for work. And we've seen a dismal performance by the Conservatives and their candidates. I think if they hide out long enough, nobody will notice that they're not around, and they'll just take advantage of people, take them for granted, and hope for their vote. People deserve much better than that. They deserve somebody that's prepared to answer questions, even the tough questions, even the uncomfortable questions, and even if you don't have all the answers. The point of the matter is you're showing up, you're putting yourself out there, you're saying to people, here's what I believe, here's what my values are, here's what I want to do to make life better for you, and here's how I'm going to do it. And that's what an election's supposed to be about, in my opinion. It's supposed to be about showing up for people and showing them that they can have hope for the future. I don't know what's happened to Mr. Del Duca this morning. I can't comment on that. But what I can say is anybody who wants to be the Premier of this province should show the decency and respect to the people of this province by being available to take questions.
Next question comes from Chris Rishowie from the Toronto Star.
Hi, Chris. Now you're going to give me a hard, tough question, right? And uncomfortable.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my questions. I just want to ask, given what the polls have been showing and consistently showing since the start of the campaign with the PCs leading, I mean, we're day before the election. Is there anything realistically that can be done where we wouldn't see the PCs reelected?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there's something that can be done. Tomorrow is Election Day, and I'm asking those 6 out of 10 voters that don't want to see Doug Ford back in the Premier's chair to coalesce behind the NDP, to mark your ballots for the NDP, and then we can guarantee that Doug Ford will not be the Premier tomorrow night, and that we will have a Premier that's working for you each and every day.
But in 2018, I mean, the NDP did see a surge where at one point, it was thought that you could form government. That hasn't happened this time. What do you think is going on? Why do you think that is?
What I think is going on is that 6 out of 10 Ontarians don't want to see Doug Ford elected. When I come to ridings like the one I'm in now, when I talk to my candidates here in Brampton and in other places, I was in Oshawa, I was in Whitby. As you know, you've seen my schedule. I've been around a little bit, but I'm hearing really positive feedback from our candidates and their campaigns. They're saying that people, when they talk to them on the doorstep, when they have those conversations, engage in a discussion about this election, that people people do know that there is a choice, that they do know that there's an option to vote for a candidate and a party that's going to step up and be there for you every single day, working on the things that matter most to you. And I really do believe that voters know that going back and forth between the Liberals and Conservatives hasn't actually brought them any kind of changes that have made life better for them. In fact, life continues to get harder. And what I'm saying to folks is, those 6 out of 10 people, please, tomorrow, let's come together. Let's come together behind the NDP and make sure that we defeat Doug Ford and start fixing the things that matter to most of us.
Next question comes from Etienne Lajoie from Le Devoir.
Hi, Etienne.
Oh, can you hear me well?
Wait.
Great. I just wanted, there was another question about Doug Ford earlier, and I just wanted to jump off of that. He's been described as sort of a changed person, premier over the last 4 years, especially as a result of the pandemic. There were some articles about it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he's changed at all since 2018?
I don't believe that Conservative cuts are going to ever stop. Conservatives cut. They cut and they privatize. Doug Ford's plan is to build a massive highway to mansions that nobody can afford while he paves over farmland, while he paves over wetlands, while he paves over conservation areas and environmentally sensitive areas, cutting into the Greenbelt, cutting into the Holland Marsh. Why? Not for us, not for you, for his buddies, for his big developer buddies. That's whose side Doug Ford is on. That's whose side he has always been on, the side of his buddies. You deserve a premier that's on your side.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. Just a comment on Del Duca, who's visiting 2 ridings today, 2 of which the NDP held under the last legislature. Any thoughts? How do you feel essentially about the fact that he's in 2 ridings that the NDP held?
Well, you'll have to ask Mr. Del Duca why he's trying to unseat New Democrats. We've been in Conservative ridings. That's where I've been spending the vast majority of my time during this election, is in Conservative ridings, because we came second in a lot of those ridings, and we know that if people want a premier that's on their side, that works for them each and every day, this time, if they vote NDP, they'll get that premier and we'll defeat Doug Ford.
Next question comes from Cynthia Mulligan from City News.
Hi, Cynthia.
You may need to unmute,
Hi,
Cynthia.
Andrea. Sorry about that. Kind of along the same vein as a couple of other previous questions. Back to Doug Ford, his first 2 years pre-COVID in government, as you know, there were many scandals, Ron Tavener, I don't have to go into all of them. And despite that, neither the NDP nor the Liberals seem to have made a dent. And one would have thought it would have been pretty easy to make a dent in Doug Ford's armor. And yet you haven't been able to. Why not? Does the province have collective amnesia about those first 2 years? Do they not want to think about it?
Well, Cynthia, it wasn't only those first 2 years. We watched as Doug Ford promised an iron ring around long-term care and lied about it. Literally lied about it. And we watched over 4,540 people lose their lives to COVID-19 and to dehydration and to malnourishment. This is what the armed forces showed us, and I'm very grateful to the Canadian Armed Forces for the work that they did during COVID-19. Other provinces hired thousands and thousands and thousands of more staff to protect our vulnerable seniors in long-term care. Doug Ford didn't want to spend the money. But what he did want to do is, the minute that his buddies that run those for-profit homes that had more tragedies and death than any other homes, whether they were not-for-profit or whether they were municipally operated, the first thing he did was protect them from lawsuits. That's what he did. Instead of protecting our seniors in long-term care, he protected his for-profit making buddies from lawsuits from the families that lost their loved ones so tragically in long-term care. Mr. Ford's priorities are his buddies, always. Whether it's his buddies that are developers along those highway routes, whether it's his buddies that are the for-profit providers of long-term care, whether it's Walmart instead of small businesses on Main Street. He chose big box stores over small businesses during the pandemic. This is how Mr. Ford operated our province. And come tomorrow night, he's just going to keep doing the same thing. He's going to make cuts, he's going to privatize, he's going to prioritize his buddies, and the rest of us are all going to pay the price. So 6 out of 10 people don't support Doug Ford. 6 out of 10 people don't want to see him as the Premier. And that's why I'm asking those folks. This time, get behind the NDP. We have the team, we have the experience, we have the strength, and we will always, always work for you.
Thank you. It seems that you and Stephen Del Duca have the same message to voters. Vote for us and we can defeat Doug Ford. And this election campaign, the two parties, the two progressive parties have very much been at each other. Have the Liberals and the NDP played straight into Doug Ford's plan and made it very easy for him to slide up the middle?
Cynthia, there's nothing progressive about firing nurses. There's nothing progressive about squeezing hospital budgets and bringing us hallway medicine, which is the Liberal track record. There's nothing progressive about selling off Hydro One, a revenue-generating asset that we could be using right now to help us with the climate crisis. There's nothing progressive about those things. There's nothing progressive about letting our schools fall apart as children sit in classrooms with their mittens and coats on in the winter and faint from heat exhaustion in the summertime in those classrooms. There's nothing progressive about that. So yeah, the Liberals talk a good game, but they broke the things that are broken. How can anybody trust them to fix it? So yeah, they talk that talk, but they don't walk that walk. And we all saw that for 15 years, which is why Mr. Del Duca didn't even win a seat last time, which is why only 7 Liberals were, not even 7, 5 Liberals were elected. A couple more have joined their ranks over the time. Look, people can know that they can have a government that actually not only believes these things, but is prepared to fix them. They can't trust the Liberals to fix them. So that's why I say to folks, this time, let's come together behind the NDP, and you will get a government that will fix the things that the Liberals broke, and that will stop Doug Ford's hurtful, painful cuts, and that will hire more nurses and fix our healthcare system and give our young people hope for the future.
Next question comes from Jack Howen from QP Briefing.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Andrea. I just want to push you a little bit about decriminalization because you sort of sidestepped that question about the 2.5 gram limit. This is something that's in your platform, decriminalization. You say you've had a lot of conversations with advocates and experts. A lot of advocates say that a small possession limit will only make street drugs more potent, more toxic. So do you think police should be arresting people for having 3 grams of drugs?
Well, again, I'm not going to make a specific, defined policy decision at this moment because I have to have the input of the experts. I mean, one of the things we watched during the pandemic is a government that refused to listen to the health experts, that based their response to COVID-19 largely on politics instead of public health advice. I'm not going to do that. It's a big policy decision, absolutely. It will save lives if we do it right. And the only way we're going to do it right is by having exactly these kinds of conversations with the experts who will be able to guide our policy development.
Okay, and we talked about safe supply, you and I, the other day, which you also said that you would consult about. These are issues that have been studied for a long time, as I'm sure you know. Do you actually have a plan for this stuff, or are you just saying stuff that progressives want to hear?
Oh, no, absolutely. We will be making all of these things come to pass if we get the chance as government. Why? Because it saves lives, because it reduces the anguish, the tragedy. All you need to do is talk to one person who lost a loved one from either poison drug supply or from an overdose, and you'll know that we need to do everything we can to prevent that from happening. It's traumatic for the loved ones that remain after someone's lost their lives. It's traumatic for communities, and we know that there are solutions. We have an obligation. We have an obligation to deal with this crisis. It is absolutely a public health emergency, and it needs to be addressed.
Seeing no further questions, I'll turn it back to you, Andrea.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, Brampton candidates and Mississauga candidates, Peel candidates. Keep on pushing. We've got another day or so to go, and I'm going to just ask you guys to keep fighting and bring it home tomorrow night. Good luck, everybody.